By neglecting the presence of a distorted history in modern institutions and basing our opinions of oppressed peoples upon uneducated judgments, political structures will continue to polarize human conceptions of reality. In the following interview, my high school history teacher, Mr. Lichty, explains the importance of recognizing context, ulterior motives, as well as the impacts of ignorance.
So one lesson that I use in U.S. history that talks about the first Discovery Day, which was the holiday that Columbus Day became. And it was commissioned to be a holiday by then President Benjamin Harrison in 1892. And really the point of the lesson actually isn't even about learning any particulars about Discovery Day history as much as it is another exercise in analyzing point of view, deconstructing context, and asking, is there more than meets the eye here? What is really going on? Why does this holiday really exist? Did Benjamin Harrison really want to celebrate Columbus? Or is there something more there?
When we think of history, particularly those of us who gain power and privilege from historical ignorance, we often neglect the chronosystem in Bronfenbrenner's ecological model. As explained by researchers Fries, Grube, and Senninger, higher drinking rates in Native American communities can be accounted for because of historical trauma and personal environments.
And for my part with religion, I respect the religion part, because like I said, I was not the one that was affiliated with the residential school, but I do have effects of the abuse and things that took back, because what my parent was, I can't say taught, I guess experienced, she brought it home. And then, when she was intoxicated, she would apply those to us. Like she would physically, talk how she was judged in residential school.
By revisiting Erik Erikson's legacy, Moin Syed and Jill Fish argued that Erikson's theories work for describing how historical trauma is associated with threats to temporal identity integration or self-continuity. In current psychological research, we also tend to ignore the prevalence of negative identities due to historical trauma.
But what was different about his perspective from later perspectives, he wasn't locating those problematic identities in the individuals themselves. He wasn't saying, oh, there's something wrong with these people and therefore they're developing problematic identities. He was saying there's been a problematic history and culture around the treatment of these groups. And that has led to struggles that have made it extremely difficult for them to be able to develop a positive identity, because the society has taken away all the sort of resources and supports to allow that identity to occur, and all that was left is a negative identity.
There also seems to be a human tendency to associate with others who hold the same socialized ideologies, just as Day and Fisk have identified individual social mobility as determining how willing we are to defend the system.
So what's interesting, though, is that was all discussed in the foundations of the psychology of identity, but then once researchers sort of took the concept of identity, they stripped all that away. Right? So we're not going to look at any of that stuff. We're not going to consider any of that. We're just going to focus on agentic pathways of identity and how people come to understand themselves within a free world.
The master narratives conceptualized by McLean and Syed attempt to develop a framework for understanding identity development in context, which could help us understand our dispositions.
And it turns out that Americans in particular, as a broad culture, are heavily dispositionalized people. So we tend to take more dispositional views on behavior than contextual views. So what that means is that if somebody does something maladaptive or negative in some way, we say there's something wrong with that person.
And in order to recognize our entrenched dispositions, we must come to appreciate context and cultural variability.
Right, so all of that seems kind of unbelievable. And so it's just like, why have I never learned this if it's true? And so I think there's a lot of, with students, a lot of sort of re-education that has to happen. That you've learned a lot of good history and important history, but you've only learned a part of that history. And a lot of it hasn't been local history that you need to learn about.